He would do before stepping into office.
Yeah, just yesterday, of course, chatting on the phone with the president of Taiwan, and that exchange breaks with nearly 40 years of U.S. diplomatic relations with China. So overnight, China is calling this, quote, a shenanigan staged by Taiwan. Trump's transition team, meanwhile, says the president-elect spoke with President Tsai of Taiwan, who offered her congratulations, and then they went on to talk about the, quote, close political, economic, and security ties that exist between Taiwan and the U.S.
But no president, or president-elect for that matter, has spoken directly with the leader of Taiwan since 1979. Since then, America has adhered to the One China policy, meaning that they consider Taiwan part of China. This after Defense Secretary Ash Carter recently called the region the most consequential for America's future. In September, Carter also said that the U.S. will sharpen its military edge there in the face of Chinese territorial expansion on disputed waters in the South China Sea. Our team of reporters standing by for the latest on this, and let's begin with CNN's Jessica Schneider live at Trump Tower in New York. And good morning to you, Jessica.
Good morning, Martin. Yeah, it is the phone call that has bucked nearly 4 decades of diplomatic tradition and protocol. President-elect Trump insisting that that 10-minute phone call was initiated by the president of Taiwan, but nevertheless, the backlash is already apparent. China reached out to the White House yesterday, and now the spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry is releasing this statement saying, I must point out that there is only one China in the world, and Taiwan is an inseparable part of the Chinese territory. The People's Republic of China is the sole legal government that represents China, and that is an internationally recognized fact. The One China principle is the political foundation of China-U.S. relations. We urge the relevant side of the U.S. to adhere to the One China. Recognize Beijing's claim that Taiwan is part of China. And now Donald Trump is on the defensive. In fact, last night after all of this hoopla, he did tweet out this. He said, interesting how the U.S. sells Taiwan billions of dollars of military equipment, but I should not accept a congratulatory call. Donald Trump's top advisor, Kellyanne Conway, saying this.
But again, I can't discuss anything beyond what's been publicly said, and I won't do that. And this is the president-elect. This will be his administration. He'll be commander-in-chief, and he'll be president of the United States imminently now. And he either will disclose or not disclose the full contents of that conversation, but he's well aware of what U.S. policy has been.
So Donald Trump's transition team backing this call, defending this call, but many lawmakers, former ambassadors, a lot of people saying that this bucks tradition, this bucks protocol, and this could present a dangerous threat to the U.S. Martin and Christy.
Jessica Schneider there. Thank you very much.
I want to get more now on China's reaction and the possible repercussions here. CNN's Stephen Zhang joining us live from Beijing. Give us some context here, Stephen, because we did hear from China overnight, and part of what came specifically from their foreign ministry spokesman there really struck out, I think, to both of us. What did you take from what they said, and talk to us about the context of it?
Christy, I have to say the ministry statement is relatively measured. I think the reason for that is China, like many other governments, is still trying to figure out the true meaning of this controversial phone call. Was it just a blunder due to the Trump team's inexperience in foreign policy, or was it something more significant, signaling a major policy shift by the incoming White House? And I think it's going to take them some time to figure out. Now, interestingly, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, on Friday met with Henry Kissinger, who of course was the former U.S. Secretary of State who was instrumental in establishing diplomatic relations between Beijing and Washington back in the 1970s. Mr. Xi actually told Mr. Kissinger it is critically important for both sides to correctly understand each other's strategic intentions. And I think Mr. Xi must be wondering what Mr. Trump's intentions are by having this phone call, and he is also probably wondering Mr. Trump is somebody he can trust and work with in the next 4 years. Christy?
Well, part of the article, the statement that stuck out to me was when they wrote, "I must point out that there is only one China in the world and Taiwan is an inseparable part of the Chinese territory. The People's Republic of China is the sole legal government that represents China, and that is an internationally recognized fact." That sounded as though he's just trying to remind not just the U.S. and this incoming administration, but the world that, look, this is how it is, and this phone call doesn't change anything.
That's right. The one China policy, as the Chinese Foreign Ministry has put it, is a cornerstone of this diplomatic relationship. But both sides have deliberately left a bit ambiguous in terms of how they interpret this policy. That's why the U.S. has been able to maintain unofficial relations with Taiwan and able to sell arms to the island to defend itself against China. At the end of the day, I think China is still trying to give the Trump team the benefit of the doubt. That's why they're putting the blame on Taiwan, because I think Mr. Xi and his team realize this relationship between Washington and Beijing is just too important to be hijacked by any single issue. No issue of a global scale or importance can be resolved without some sort of consensus or cooperation between the two sides. That's why we are talking about the South China Sea territorial disputes, North Korea, and climate change. That's why I think the Chinese response so far has been measured, and they're trying to walk a very fine line here, Christy.
Stephen Zhang, we appreciate it so much. Thank you, sir.
So when is a phone call not really a phone call or something more? Let's talk more about this with CNN politics reporter Eugene Scott and the reporter for Talking Points, Memo Lauren Fox. Eugene, let me start with you. Trump tweeted out that the Taiwanese president called him, though of course we're learning that you don't just sort of call up Donald Trump on the fly. This had to have some way been coordinated. So do you think that this is deliberate policy, a change here that we're seeing on the part of the Trump administration?
I think what happened, if it is true that the Taiwanese president called Donald Trump first, is that they perhaps paid attention to how critical Donald Trump was of China throughout his campaign, promising to put tariffs on China, accusing the country of being a manipulator of its currency, and perhaps was hoping that there was a shoe and an opportunity for an improved relationship with the United States, especially in the area of trade. And we saw yesterday that one of Trump's advisors on Chinese issues said they definitely think there's a way to have warmer relationships with Taiwan without compromising its relationship with Beijing. So I think Taiwan perhaps wanted to take advantage of that opportunity.
And Lauren, we know that Trump, took a very hard line toward China during the campaign. In fact, here's an example.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world.
So, after making a very strong statement like that, Lauren, he follows up with a phone call that he gets from Taiwan. What kind of relations can we expect then between the U.S. and the Trump administration? Is this just a taste?
Well, I think that we don't know at the moment. That's sort of where we're at. And I think that one thing that we might see moving forward is that maybe some of the stuff Donald Trump said on the campaign trail, he really does plan to implement. And maybe one of those is the relationship with China, the stance that he will take against China. And maybe one of the sort of signals that he's sending is that he took sort of this historic phone call, something that hasn't been done over the last 4 decades. And so I think that there's a lot to be seen here. And I think there's some discussion of whether or not this was a mistake, whether he didn't understand sort of what he was doing, or whether or not this was very intentional. And it's possible, given his campaign rhetoric, that that's exactly what happened.
President-elect Eugene seems to have been pushing back last night. He tweeted saying this, quote, "Interesting how the U.S. sells Taiwan billions of dollars of military equipment, but I should not accept a congratulatory call." So, Eugene, the U.S. does have an informal economic relationship with Taiwan and does have a defensive relationship somewhat. What do you think of all of this?
I think Trump's tweet exemplifies the complexity of the one China policy. The fact is, it's really open to interpretation by multiple countries. At its core, it recognizes that there is just one China, but how one responds to that China varies depending on the democracy that we're speaking of. And how the U.S. has responded is, while not having communication with the leaders of Taiwan, certainly we've been in communication with the country economically when it comes to trade.
Eugene Scott, Lauren Fox, thank you both for joining us this morning. We weren't supposed to find out until next week, but here's how the crowd at Donald Trump's victory rally heard the news broken in front of them.
We are going to appoint Mad Dog Mattis